Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, host and head bookologist here at the Get Literate podcast. I'm a book-loving, notebook-hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. On this podcast, we explore the power of bookology and leading literate lives. We talk all things books and reading and notebooks and writing, mixed in with mindful practices and creativity to create lives we love. You can expect regular weekly episodes focused on 3 books you need to know about on a bookish theme and how to bring those themes to life in our actual lives too. You can also expect author interviews, notebooking inspiration, and topics to help us grow through what we go through and take inspired action to make our lives better. So grab a notebook and your TBR list and let's get literate. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Get Literate podcast. I'm Stephanie, your bookologist and host, here every week to talk about how reading and writing can make life better. Now, if you're listening to this in real time, tomorrow is Valentine's Day, and I love matching my episode themes to the calendar and, of course, my one-word theme of the month. In the past, I have shared posts and book lists that pair books and chocolate together. You can find that on my blog at alitlife.com. One year, I talked about what our notebook love language was. That's episode 43, if you'd like to take a listen. And I also, in episode 41, shared a themed book list on Send a Friend a Card Day. Those were books that really celebrated the art of letter writing and epistolary novels and good old-fashioned stationery. So this month, my one-word theme in my life and in my Get Literate community is adore. And to celebrate Valentine's Day, I've got a fun episode planned around book projects I adore and envy and maybe cross the line into jealousy. So what do I mean by book projects? I mean something that readers do to commemorate and celebrate the book they're reading. Now, these can be little micro actions like keeping a books I've read list in your notebook, going on Goodreads and posting a starred review or even a descriptive review, going on Storygraph and doing the same thing. Maybe you post your latest book that you've read on social media. Maybe you phone a friend and you just make sure that you recommend and pay that book forward to at least one person. Or maybe you just jot down in your planner or your calendar or your agenda which book you finished during which month. So many of us track our books in so many different ways, and these small actions can go a long way in creating a reading life you love. We know that what we pay attention to, that's what grows, right? Energy flows where attention goes. So if you just track your reading, even a very simplistic way, then usually your reading life grows. But there are some readers who go big. And by big, I mean really big and special and creative and inspiring. And I adore the book projects that they have created for themselves. Those are the kind of special book projects I want to talk about with you today. They are the projects that I love to follow on social media. They are the things that make me stop my scroll when I'm just browsing my feed. They're the things that inspire me, and I just can't believe that people get so creative. And they're also the things that I get a little bit jealous about too. I mean, where do they think of these ideas? How do they put them together? Where do they find the time to do it? Those are the things we are talking about today. So, before I jump in, I want to explain that I have found these in my bookish adventures. So most of them came from social media, some of them came from blogs that I follow, and others even came from YouTube channels. I love them all, and I'm going to talk about my favorites here. Then I'm going to transition. We're going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to talk to you about some book projects to get your brain thinking. Then I'm going to switch over to a conversation that I had with a Get Literate listener who's embarking on her own bookish adventure so that we can see what she's doing in hopes of inspiring our own. And then after that, I'm going to reveal what my own personal 2024 book project is going to be. So make sure you stick around for all of the different components of today's episode. So first up, what is the first bookish project that I absolutely adore and I want to share with you? Well, it's Steph Hockersmith's Pie Lady books. If you listen to this podcast, you love books. And if you love books, you most likely know Pie Lady books. She's got almost 87,000 followers on Instagram. She's been featured on Good Morning America, The Today Show, The Kelly Clarkson Show, and she has the best idea. Now, what I love is that this idea actually came out of a challenge in her life. She was struggling with a chronic illness, trying to figure out where to go and what to do and how to find health and happiness. And she stumbled upon this idea that is now a really big thing. So what is Pie Lady Books? Well, Steph is a reader, and after she reads her books, she makes a pie. And not just any pie, but a gluten-free pie crust, she is also gluten-free, that matches the cover of the book. So I don't want you to think of, the traditional baked apple pies or cherry pies, right? It's not even about what's in the pie. It's about what's on top. So these are pie crusts. And then on top of the pie crust, there are these beautiful fondant creations that match the book. They may have the same colors of the cover. They may actually have the title printed on it. They usually have some sort of symbol or emblem or something that represents her understanding of the book. And then she puts it out into this beautiful Instagram picture that is just a joy to look at. So if you were to go on her feed, and her feed, by the way, is at Pie Lady Books, you just get lost. You get lost in the pies, you get lost in the creativity, but then you get lost in the books and all of the titles that you might want to read. Looking at her feed right now, some of the titles that are featured are All Along You Were Blooming, which is a beautiful book, Nina Lee and Seeing Things, The Other Half, The House of Plain Truth, Finding Imogene, The Road Unpaved, The Magic All Around Us. There are so many books that you can add to your TBR. And then it's just a little bit of creativity boost. It's that color and shapes that infuses so much joy into this feed. But what I also love is interspersed on the feed are pies and cakes that just have really fun bookish quotes and bookish inspiration. Like here's one. It's a pie. It looks like it's a cherry pie of sorts that says, going to the grocery store just isn't a priority when the fate of a fictional character is hanging in the balance. And that is written either in frosting or fondant. Here's another one. Why, yes, I do enjoy when you sit and talk to me while I'm trying to read an awesome book. It's my favorite. No sarcasm there. It is such a fun feed to follow, and sometimes she'll put stories on her feed that show her putting the pies together in real time, and it's just addicting. It is so addicting. So that's Pie Lady Books, Steph Hockersmith, whose project is creating beautiful, delicious pies that match the book covers. Now, up next is a project that I think is gaining in popularity. I saw it a couple years back, and now I am seeing it and variations of it everywhere. So the second project that I love is the mini book ornament. These are those big, clear plastic ornament bulbs that you could get at Hobby Lobby or your favorite craft store. And then typically you put the year written in like puffy paint or glitter paint. And then inside are miniature, really miniature covers of every single book you've read throughout that year. So that when you look at your holiday Christmas tree, you can see an ornament filled with all of the books that you enjoyed. It is a book lover's Christmas dream. Now, I have never made a mini book ornament, but I have ordered many books off of Etsy from a variety of artists to try to see which ones I love. Some are printed in 3D, some are printed and then taped onto foam. And then others that I see online, they simply print them from their home computers using a template on Canva, and then they fold them up so that they resemble a book. That way, they're squishable, and you can squish them into the top of the ornament so that all of them fit in so nicely. It's so beautiful to look at, and I imagine it would be really fun to create if that is your kind of thing. And to have that ornament out all year, and every time you finish a book, print it out, fold it, stuff it in, watching your ornament grow, and then ceremoniously putting on the Christmas tree, oh, it would just be so much fun. Now, in the show notes, I've put a link to Amy Lanham's, which is the person that I first found it from. And she actually goes step by step on how she does this. And even, I believe, puts a little template there for you to use if that's something that you might want to try. It's only the beginning of February, so there is still plenty of time to do book projects for the books we've read, even taking a look at the backlist that you just finished in January. Now, very similarly, the next project, it is so much fun. And I could see myself going down a bookish rabbit hole and never coming back out. These are also miniature books, but they're not miniature books that are in an ornament. They're miniature books that you actually put on a miniature bookshelf so that it mimics what your real big bookshelf looks like in real life. It mimics that based on the books that you've read. So you basically print out these mini book covers, you adhere them to foam. Maybe you go on Etsy and you have someone else do this for you. You go on to Amazon or your favorite store, you get a mini bookshelf, and every time you read a book, you just fill up that shelf. I could see a mini bookshelf sitting on my actual bookshelf as I read books and watching it fill. I just love it. I love it. And in the show notes, I'm linking to an Instagram account at Mads Lewis. And there she has links to all her favorite miniature things that could help you build your mini bookshelf. She's got how-to tutorials. She has pictures of all of hers, and then the links to the different items you might want to create your own. It is absolutely adorable. I don't know if I'm up for making one, but the how-to looked pretty easy. The Canva template looks super simple as well. But I think if I'm going to do it, I might just support an independent artist on Etsy and every month ask them to print it for me and keep their passion going so that I can look at it and enjoy mine. Now, related to the mini bookshelf is something I've not quite ever considered doing, and that's creating a mini bookshelf, but creating it out of an Altoids can. You have to see this online. I'm putting a link to the Instagram reel from Y Street Studio, who made this. Not only do you see the finished project, but you see her making it in real time on Canva, uploading your book covers, shrinking them down to the appropriate size, and then printing them and assembling them so that they fit so beautifully in this Altoid. It's just amazing. Even the little book spines that show are just amazing. So if you love the miniature thing, you could go mini book ornament, you could go mini bookshelf, or maybe you go really mini and you do a mini Altoids tin of the books that you've read. You might do your top 10 favorites on these bookshelves or in these ornaments, or if you want, do one for every single book you've read. Either way, I just think there's just so much joy in looking at it. It is such a great conversation piece. And I just admire people who are willing to put that time in to make one for themselves to celebrate their reading life. All of those things are just so creative. Now, you might love all of those, but think, Stephanie, I cannot bake a pie after every book I've read. I cannot print out a miniature book after every book I've read. I don't have that skill. I don't have that time. Don't worry. There are a couple of projects left that you could do. And the first one is a bullet journal book spread. So this might sound appealing to you if you love notebooking, if you love book journaling, or if you love scrapbooking. It's basically a notebook or a notebook page where you just put all of your thinking and creativity about that book on paper. So maybe on your spread, you've got the title and the author in big letters up top and the date that you completed it. You could print out a book cover and tape it in, or get one of those cool little printers that prints out those square pictures and pop it right into your notebook. You could add how many stars you gave it by actually creating the stars. I rate books in terms of hearts instead. And so you could write how many hearts the book was worth. You could put your start date, your end date, how many pages, what the genre is, and then anything else you want. Why did you like the book? What did you learn? What were your favorite quotes? Who might you recommend it to? What book does it make you want to read next? What are your connections? What are your disconnections? Maybe you do a plot summary. You can put whatever you want to hold on to and remember from the book on the page. Now, I have my own book journal. I actually made one so that I could get all of the pieces I wanted to take out of a book on one page. But this allows you the creativity. So you can put down whatever you want to put down and then have some fun. Get out your markers and your smelly gel pens and embellish. Make patterns and shapes around your favorite quotes. Get out your stickers and put stickers that match the theme of the book everywhere. Use the colors to really bring the mood and the theme of the book to light, and then add whatever else you want. It's a really fun way to think through the book a little bit more, get a little bit more reflection in, and then putting pen to paper, especially doing this by hand, that makes sure that we actually remember the book later, which makes it easier to talk about and easier to connect it to the next reader, which just builds our reading community. So you might consider bullet journal book spreads. And in the show notes, I'm linking to one of my favorites. The account called Planning in French, and yes, her account is in French, but it translates. It doesn't matter the language, the book spreads still look beautiful. She actually wrote an article for Archer and Olive, which is one of my favorite notebook shops. And in that article, talked about why she keeps a bullet journal for reading, how she does it, what to include, and then actually puts a lot of examples of spreads in it. As I mentioned, it's in French, doesn't matter. It's beautiful to look at and will likely inspire you to start a couple of notebook pages as well. Now, last up, I have an account that I've been following for a while. And this one, when I look at it, definitely gets the jealousy going because there is no way that I could ever duplicate what Folded Pages Distillery does on Instagram. She makes these absolutely beautiful photographic flat lays that represent the theme of the book. So on her flat lay, she will have the book typically front and center. And then all around the book are objects and ephemera and fabrics and flowers and just little things that bring the book to life. So when you look at it, you know what that book is about. You know what you're going to find in here. There's one that I love. It's a picture book called Ramen for Everyone. And in the middle of the picture is that book. But then all around it are all the ingredients one might need to make ramen for themselves. It just brings the book to life. And what I love is that she's usually flat-laying books that I haven't read. We have different reading styles, and that's why I like it, because I can come here not just for reading inspiration and reading jealousy, but I also end up adding a lot of books to my TBR that I wouldn't normally add. So that's a benefit of getting addicted to other people's book projects, not only for the book project themselves, but just for the chance to see what they're reading and broaden your whole book perspective in the process. So those are my favorites right now. I've got Pie Lady books making beautiful pie covers. We have miniature book ornaments, miniature bookshelves in Altoid cans, some beautiful bullet journal spreads, and some beautiful picture flat lays of books too. I'm wondering which one has caught your attention. Which one made you press pause and go onto Instagram and look these accounts up? Which one is speaking to you? Whether because it sounds fun, you just want to admire it, you want to try it, you're feeling that pull of envy or jealousy, right? So why not try one? You don't have to commit to doing something big like this for every book that you read in 2024, but why not try it? Why not try printing one single miniature book from your own printer and see how it feels? Why not open up your notebook and get out your markers and your stickers and your washi tape and actually journal out the book that you've read? There is no commitment here. If you do this once, you do not have to continue it and consider yourself a failure if you didn't. But it might be fun to just try to do different things after you read your books in order to celebrate them. Now, coming up next, I want to invite you to listen in on a conversation that I had with a fellow Get Literate listener, Catherine Zerdy. Now, this was such bookish synchronicity. I was online doing research for this actual episode, pulling all the Instagram accounts that I wanted to share. And as I was doing that, she sent me a message in Facebook Messenger that said, look at this. This is a cool book project I thought you might want to know about. And I couldn't believe it because the timing was perfect. So we ended up hopping on a Zoom call to talk about book projects in general, but specifically what her bookish project was going to be for this year. And let me give you a sneak peek. It's using knitting. Yes, knitting, crocheting, quilt squares. Just imagine what a bookish reading quilt could look like. So creative, so fun. I actually want to try a little bit of this, and Catherine has already shared with me some YouTube videos to prepare, the supplies I need, and then maybe if I can do that well enough, hopping on a Zoom call to give it a try as well. So here is my conversation with Catherine. And after it ends, don't go away because I'll be back sharing with you what my bookish project of 2024 is going to be. Catherine, welcome to the Get Literate podcast. I am so excited to talk to you today.
Hey, Stephanie, thank you so much. It's great to finally meet you over Zoom.
Yes, it's the closest we'll get for a little bit for in real life, maybe, but this is definitely
definitely.
So I've already filled listeners in a little bit about the bookish serendipity we had going on. So not too long ago, I was researching for an upcoming episode of the podcast. I wanted to really dive into some book projects that I had seen online that I loved and I was a little bit jealous of. And because I was trying to find my own kind of book project to put my stamp on. And
Sure.
as I was on the internet, doing the research, you sent me a message through Facebook Messenger with this really amazing book project idea. And I thought, well, that is perfect timing. We need to come together and talk about these book projects because we both were searching for something fun to do that was related to things we loved and related to the books we've read. And today we're going to talk about what those are. So I'm really excited to pick your brain about this.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm excited to have the opportunity to share it.
Yeah. So why don't you give listeners a little backstory? They know you're Catherine and they know you love Get Literate, but give them a little bit more. Tell them who you are and where you are in the world.
Okay, sounds great. Well, I'm Catherine Zerdy, and I live in a little historic town called Hudson, Ohio, halfway between Cleveland and Akron. Yeah, we're just about in the snow belt here, but we don't have any snow right now. Anyway, I'm a retired teacher. of many, many things through the years, in different places around the country. And I'm happily retired. So having a ball, getting to do the things that I've always wanted to do, but never had time to do them.
Yeah.
So I grew up sitting at the feet of my grandmother at a sewing machine, or with her balls of yarn and her knitting needles clicking. And I think it's genetic for me. I have a yarn problem. So I have too many projects going, right? But and occasionally I finish a few. So on the 1st of January, I was looking for a pattern for on the internet for a blanket that I've heard of, and I've seen a couple that people have made. It's called a temperature blanket, and it's crocheted or knitted with yarn. And so, I was just looking around for different patterns, and I came across an alternative called a book blanket. I'm like mind blown, because
Yes.
I am a bookaholic. And that's why I love my bookologist so much. I meet you. And so I saw this as a potential way to connect my reading with my love of anything made with yarn. So I knit, crochet, spin, and weave.
Wow.
And so anyway, I started researching all the different ideas, and then I came up with a few of my own. So if your listeners are aware of like granny squares, the first one that I came across was this one pattern called for granny squares that incorporated the colors of different covers of books. So, like, for instance, with comfort and joy, red, green, and white. That's a simple one, right?
Yeah.
With as long as the lemon trees grow, that beautiful Prussian blue with a soft sunny yellow, and so on and so forth. So granny squares that are then connected with one color like black, and then unified into a blanket. The squares would be about maybe 6 inches square. Or they could really be any size you wanted, and based on any books. And you don't have to read 80 books in a year and make 80 blanket squares unless you really truly read that many books. But you could also just make larger squares out of with incorporating more rows. And then, like, you could even have a blanket out of 25, 5 squares across, 5 squares down.
Oh, I just have to interrupt you because
Sure.
this idea is just so beautiful to picture. First of all, I'd have zero knitting, crocheting, weaving, spinning abilities. So the fact that someone could make this as a representation of the reading life just kind of blows my mind, and I am instantly envious. But I can just picture, right, those beautiful covers, and both books, by the way, I adored. Such good titles to put as examples for those colors. But I could just imagine one of those old-fashioned kind of quilts with those beautiful squares, and gosh, to just wrap yourself up in a blanket surrounded by the books that you've read, that is just beautiful. It's beautiful.
Isn't that neat?
It is.
I came across, well, actually, I came up with one idea of my own, which I am beginning to, it's in the planning stages right now. And so it's an alternative book blanket. So that's where I would either crochet, it could either be crocheted or knitted. So I would think of like a symbol from a book that I read, like As the Lemon Trees Grow. That's an easy one.
Right.
So that would be like with that Prussian blue background, and then incorporating a lemon, just a simple lemon tree in the design of that block. And then for insignificant events in the life of a cactus, I might crochet a green cactus against an orange Arizona sky, right? By just using a single crochet stitch all throughout and just changing colors. So I'm designing a block right now for as long as the lemon trees grow, using graph paper and colored pencils. And then each square becomes either one single crochet or one knit or purl stitch if I'm knitting. So there are a lot of different opportunities to a lot of different ideas that I have for different books that I'm reading right now or that I will read in the future. And again, the squares could be size, you can really manipulate the size of the square by the size of your hook, by the size of your yarn. Like worsted weight is kind of a normal sweater weight yarn, or you could use a chunky weight. Or like the scarf that I'm wearing right now, I could use a thick and thin.
Yeah, which is a beautiful scarf. Listeners can't see it, but
Right.
it's beautiful with these little puffs or so. It's just beautiful.
Bubbles and bangles. Yep.
Yes, yes.
And so that's another idea that I had. And then do you want me to go on to the third idea, or did you have any questions about that one?
I do want to jump in because I'm really glad you talked about the how. So you kind of got two things going on. One is the book, right? And
Right.
what's going on in the book. And I imagine as you're reading it, it's helping you go deeper into your reflection about the book. Like, what colors would I use? What might convey the mood of the book? How could I represent the cover? Which symbol would I use? I see that enriching your reading life so much, just thinking about those pieces. But then on the other side, it sounds like you're having some fun with graph paper and plotting it out. And the fact that that could be one single stitch is another thing that blows my mind. Um, but I feel like it's taking two things that you love, and it's not just mixing them together, it's making both of them better in the process of an experience. And that's so exciting.
I love that idea because, yes, it is making both experiences better. It's a marriage,
Yeah.
of, I've got this thing with my fingers, right? And being able to translate the image that really stands out for me, like, for instance, in Comfort and Joy, that white arrowhead,
Mm.
that the character, yeah, I don't want to give anything away, but in case anybody has read it, they might know. Finding a way to incorporate that into the greens of the deep forest, and color is so important, and texture as well, right? So,
That's why you have a yarn obsession. A yarn problem.
oh,
You said you had a yarn problem.
oh, I do, I
I'm
do.
not labeling it a problem though. You did.
I know it's my palette, right? It's just a
Yeah.
palette.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of palette. But anyway, a third one is called a genre blanket. And I was looking into that as a type of book blanket. So a genre blanket is where you assign different colors of yarn to whatever genre. Like, for instance, purple could be a color for fantasy, gray might be a color for science fiction, red for romance, or whatever it may be. And then you could, this is the one that's the most similar to a temperature blanket, because for every 100 pages that you read, or 200, however many, 50, whatever, you determine the number, you could do 5 rows of that genre color in a very simple stitch, just a simple single crochet or just a simple knit stitch. And so that's just another idea.
I love that. I love
A
that
genre
because
blanket.
it's not just a representation of the books, but just the process and the engagement in it and how much. Like, I could almost look at that blanket because I'm a nerd. You know this, you listen to me. I am a book nerd and I love my book stats. So I love seeing how many different genres did I read and where do I get my books from? And I'm thinking that, that Google Doc image, that Google Sheets image that I look at that
Right.
gives me that beautiful pie chart of how many genres I've read is
Right.
this beautiful creative blanket is almost the same thing to see over time how you have varied your reading life or leaned into a genre. I love that. I love that.
Kind of like a temperature blanket is where you would have different colors representing different, for instance, navy blue would be from 20 below to 10 below, which you might see in your area of the country once in a while, right?
Once in a while, thankfully not
Once
that
in a
often.
while, not Alaska, right? And then maybe a Prussian blue for 10 to 0, and then a light blue for 0 to 10, and so on. And then, getting into your hotter colors, you could really experiment with your pinks and purples and oranges and reds. And so you can see the patterns of the climate for that year. So this would be a visual representation of your inner climate, your emotional life, your likes and dislikes, it's just a nice way to show where you've been for that year. And as you compare, if you do genre blankets every year, to see what kind of transformation happens from year to
I
year.
love that. And I feel like even someone like me who does not know how to do this, that feels reachable to me because it seems simpler than figuring out a square or figuring out a symbol. If I could just master a stitch, right?
And I'd be happy to teach you
I
anytime. We could do it on Zoom.
That was going to be my follow-up of when are you attempting to teach me this?
Anytime. You set the day. Remember, I'm retired. I have time.
I love it. I love
I'd
that.
be honored. I'd love it.
Because that one to me, like they all sound beautiful, but I feel like that one's calling out to me like, hey, you could do that one. And since you love that kind of nerdy bookish number stats, this is the creative version of that.
Oh, I agree. And then there's one other thing that I want to bring out. I I have at the knit shop where I have my little knitting group. If I can just mention the name of the
Please
shop, it's
do.
called Longtail Knits. It's in not too far from my home, and there's a gal there who is an what we call an indie dyer. DYER. So she dyes yarn. She dyes all different kinds of wools into beautiful color schemes. And recently, she's been dyeing batches for hats representing the different national parks. I'm thinking I'm going to talk to her about maybe coming up with some color schemes for different books. And then you could actually, like, for instance, there's an indie dyer that I follow called Destination Yarns. Jeannie, she did a whole series of colorways, what we call colorways, for the idyllic scenes in Lord of the Rings. She has 5 different color patterns, and you can
They're
incorporate
beautiful.
those into a
You
sweater.
showed me. Yeah, you showed me
Yeah.
the pictures of them. They are beautiful.
They're gorgeous.
Yeah.
So you don't have to limit yourself to a blanket if you want to make a sweater or a baby blanket or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then you've got I was thinking about my granddaughter who is a bibliophile. Her name is Renly, and she loves books. She listens to audiobooks she's in kindergarten, but she listens to audiobooks every day instead of watching television or anything like that. And
So Renly.
yeah, friendly. So I'm thinking about a a little girl blanket for her, based on the colors that come to mind with Caddy Woodlawn, the Laura Ingalls Wilder series, Mr. Popper's Penguins, Pippi Longstocking, all of her favorites, right? And so I was thinking about maybe a blanket for her using her favorites, and not necessarily a yearly annual blanket, but like a one-time big special blanket.
Yeah.
Baby blankets could be made for like Pat the Bunny, squares for Pat the Bunny, a square for Hop on Pop, a square for Cat in a Hat, and all of the books that the Wonky Donkey is a recent one. All of those wonderful, wonderful picture and board books could be incorporated into a baby book blanket, and then the books could be given as part of that gift. Can you imagine?
Oh
Talk
my
about
goodness.
one of a kind.
Yes.
So yeah.
Oh, there are just so many ideas. I love seeing how you've taken that one inspiration and you've just put it in so many directions, the granny squares, the symbols, the genre, now a baby blanket, a little girl blanket, your favorites blanket, or a scarf, or a hat,
Yeah.
or whatever you want it to be. Oh my gosh. So which one do you think you're going to do? Or are you just going to try them all? I
I do think that I will try them all at one point,
think you should.
even for a graduate of high school. How about all of their favorites throughout their growing up years,
Yeah.
soliciting from them all of their favorites. I used to quilt, but it's hard for me to sit at the sewing machine all day. Knitting and crocheting allows me to work in the car, to work while I'm sitting next to my hubby, watching television at night, or meeting with my friends, right? So it's very portable. So that's what I love about that particular aspect of yarn.
Yeah. You know what strikes me too in the whole conversation, right? It's about books, it's
It
about
is.
yarn, which are two loves, but it's also about the connections between the two of them, but then the connections that come as a result. So to connect with your granddaughter, which beautiful name, by
I
the way,
love
of it, to
Thank you.
connect with other people, around the books that you're reading, or even the community that you've built and the yarn shop around this kind of work. It's just when you take those things that you love and you talk about them and you share them, you can't help but just make other people around you happier. Even if yarn isn't their thing, like I can imagine listeners right now, like, ooh, that does sound good. I can't knit. Number one, maybe I could. Number two, here's what I love to do. How could I turn that into a book project? So, like, I've got like the bookish goosebumps right now. Like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see where you go with it. I'm hoping, first of all, I'm assuming, and then I'm hoping because I shouldn't have
Yes.
done that. Are you sharing your journey about this? Will you post online? Will
You
you put
bet
it
I
there?
will. You
Okay,
bet
good,
I will, ma'am.
good. So what I can do in the show notes is we could link to the yarn shop you mentioned, maybe those Instagram
Yes.
accounts that you mentioned for people that are interested, and
Yes.
wherever they may be able to find you too, so that they can follow this journey if they'd like to.
Oh, that sounds like a wonderful idea. Might have to start a new Facebook page for that. Okay.
Well, you know what, Catherine? In my head, I'm thinking I could think of so many people who would love to call you up and say, "Hey, here are my 12 books. Want to make me this blanket?" It's
That would be
exciting.
a tough one, but I would be happy to teach them on Zoom. That's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah,
Or
I'm
they
I'm
can go to
definitely
their,
I'm
yeah.
gonna follow up with you on that for sure. I used to be
Okay.
able to crochet. I remember with my stepmom, we made our own Christmas stockings one year, and it was recognizable. It was a stocking. It had red, it had white at the top.
Oh,
So that skill's in there somewhere. Maybe I just need to find it again.
how about a comfort and joy Christmas stocking?
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful.
There you go.
So, what's a book that you're reading right now, or maybe you've read, and how are you imagining it showing up somehow in this bookish project of yours?
Okay, so I am currently reading Momentous Events in the Life of a Cactus. And I just finished Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus. And so I might represent, I mentioned earlier about with Insignificant Events having the saguaro cactus, which the main character does not have arms, and so that's why the cactus plays as a a symbol plus an important part of the setting of the story. It's almost like another character. So I might have the cacti join somehow join together and, or maybe be facing each other, have, some kind of a design like that where I somehow connect those two images. I haven't quite figured that out yet, though. So if you have an idea, let me know.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if you'll get that kind of advice from me. I can
Yeah.
fill your, your book cart with books, but I don't know if I can fill your yarn ideas. But I love how you're crossing. You're not just thinking of one book, you're thinking about how they relate to each
Yes.
other too, which is just
Oh,
wonderful.
absolutely. Yeah, that was a good catch there. I like that. Yeah.
So I can feel your enthusiasm for the project. You've built my enthusiasm for just book projects in general, and now yarn. I could easily see myself going on Instagram and just getting sucked in by all those beautiful yarn colors. Colorway.
Okay.
I learned a new term, colorway.
Okay.
Do you have any advice for listeners who want to have a book project? They're not quite sure what, they don't know what direction to go to. Do you have any ideas for kind of finding something that might work for them, like you found something that works for you?
Well, after reading As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow, oh, that book
I
took
know.
the breath right out of me. I think it's the most beautiful book that I have read in 10 years, maybe.
Yeah.
And I didn't want it to end. You know how those kinds of
Mm.
stories go. It and so uh when something sits with me like that for a long time, and this just happened to be right at the end of the year. So wouldn't you know, on January 1, when I started to search for a temperature blanket pattern, and then it turned into wait, what's this? A book, a book
Yeah.
blanket, and so on and so forth. It just gives me a place, crafting, making gives us a place uh to process
Mm.
to process all that's going on inside. And that book was so emotional for me, not ever having had, there wasn't much of a cross with my own life, but the heart issues. So finding a way to kind of like what you do with your journaling, with your morning pages, right? Getting that out there in front of you. And that's what crafts can do too. Takes longer, but you know what I mean? So I hope that answers your question, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like it's everybody has a thing, right?
Yeah.
That they like, even if they don't find the time they want for that thing. I bet deep down, if everyone just thought of something they loved and they happen to just give themselves 10 minutes to do a little Google search for, like you did, and just lean into it, that's when the ideas come. So it's think about you, think about what you love, what might be a really natural, authentic way to represent your book love, but consider some sort of creative, crafty thing like this, even if you don't think you're capable, right? Because you really are.
Yes.
And it's about the process of giving yourself that time and letting yourself think and all those beautiful things that come from just playing with your hands.
Exactly. And plus, the benefits that you've taught me, even beyond what I already knew as an English teacher, about the physiological benefits of
Yeah.
reading. You get those same physiological benefits, many of the same, they overlap with
Yes.
working with yarn between your fingers, pulling it between, right? And creating something beautiful with your hands. It's both, have that meditative quality to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on and sharing your ideas, your love, your enthusiasm. I can't wait to see where it goes, and I will be calling you for that Zoom meeting to
That's
to
great,
chat.
Stephanie. That
And
sounds wonderful.
yeah, thank you so much. I really love talking with you, and we'll have to keep each other posted on the
We
podcast.
will. Oh, I will. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks for listening and stay tuned. Don't press pause yet because when we come back, I will share what my book project is going to be and a few helpful resources to get you started on yours too. Okay, everyone, I am back. Wasn't that such a fun conversation? You just can't help but get swept away into what other people find so interesting and creative. And I hope listening to Catherine talk about her goal and her possibilities that she's tossing around in the air can help you think about yours. But first, before I prompt you to think a little bit more about what that might be for you, I want to share what I want to try. Because as much as I loved that conversation, and as much as I know that I will attempt to knit something, I know it's not feasible for me to say that I'm going to knit an entire blanket based on the books that I've read. It's just not my thing, at least not right now. And while I think I'll enjoy it, I know there are other things that really are speaking to me instead. Now, if I'm honest with you, there is one book project that immediately came to mind that I know is not really possible. Well, no, that's not true. I guess anything is possible, but I just don't know if it's feasible. And here it is. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know I have a couple of addictions in life. I love really good black coffee. I eat peanut butter by the spoonful. And my very favorite treat is frosting, just homemade vanilla frosting by the spoon. Come on, come on. I know you have your own secret things that you indulge yourself with too. So honestly, the very first book project I thought of was a frosting flight. I know, you've never heard of it, have you? A frosting flight. So think about the different flights we have. There are wine flights, coffee flights, and beer flights. Basically a collection of 3 or 4 miniature things that are paired together that you taste. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to have a frosting flight? Kind of playing off the Pie Lady books theme. I thought it would be so fun to make cupcakes with different flavored frosting that could represent the books that we've read. And honestly, the first book that I read where this really came to life was Terry M. Brown's Daughters of Green Mountain Gap. It's this beautiful book about family and motherhood and healing and what the right kind of healing is. And there are a lot of mentions in the book about old time food and treats like apple cake and a whole lot of conversation around herbs and what they're good for, medicinally. And in my mind, I was building this fun little cupcake display with different cupcakes and frostings that could match the book. And I was envisioning being in a live book club and bringing out these little cupcakes and enjoying them as we had a book club. Doesn't that sound fun? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it at least for one book or 2 or 3 that I read, but I really need to do it with someone that is actually going to help me eat them because it is not feasible to make a whole tray of cupcakes for every book that I read because I read a lot and I cannot resist frosting when it's in the house. But that was honestly the first fun thing that came to mind that I do want to try at least once. And so as you think about what might be jumping out to you as something that you could do to celebrate a book that you've read, what is that first thing that comes to mind? Don't discount it immediately, like I attempted to, but just tell yourself it might be fun to do that once and see how it goes. But in thinking about more reality, there is something I know that I could do, and in fact, usually already do for every single book that I've read. But I know in 2024, I could do it more intentionally. Right. So, you know that I believe, and I started this episode out with the idea that reading and writing can make life better. And I truly believe that the books we read can change our lives, but only if we take inspired action from them. And that's what I try to do for every book I read, whether that inspired action is just pairing that book with another reader that I think would love it, or journaling about what I'm learning from the messages in the book in my own notebook, I do something. Now, sometimes those somethings are bigger, like when I read The Magic of Lemon Drop Pie by Rachel Linden. I actually made a gluten-free lemon meringue pie, and it was wonderful, and it was fun, and it enriched my life. When I read Kristen Wireman's This Time Could Be Different, I did a lot of things. I made an audio meditation. I actually made my own homemade face cream. I did bigger things. So I want to, in 2024, be more intentional about the inspired action I take from every single book I've read. Now, I've already read some books in January and February, and so I thought for a minute about what some of those books I've read were and what some of those inspired actions were that I've already taken. So let me give you an example. Not too recently, I read The House of Plain Truth by Donna Hemans. This is a Zibby Books book. You know I love Zibby Books. And it was just beautiful. It was a beautiful book about family relationships, the bonds that hold us together or don't, and what happens when you dig a little bit deeper and maybe uncover some of those family secrets. Now, woven into that story was a strong focus on family heritage and culture and food. I was getting intrigued and a little hungry as I read this book. And after I turned that last page, I realized I still have all of my grandmother's recipes. They're preserved in a box. I still don't know what to do with them that can really celebrate them. But after I read that book, I just went and I got them out. I got them out and I browsed through them and I looked at them and remembered some of the recipes that she made, remembered some of the times that we baked together, and just really enjoyed sifting through her things. It was a small action, but it brought me a lot of joy. After I read Mind Over Matter, which was a nonfiction book about how the brain works by Dawson Church, I actually did a couple of things, but the two that really stand out were one, I made a list of personal affirmations, affirmations that I knew I needed and wanted in this stage of my life so that I could look at them as I was drinking my coffee every morning and start to train my brain to think differently. I also went online and searched for a couple of meditations to try. I'm not a really good meditator. I can only last a few short minutes, but a few short minutes is all that you need in order to change the way your brain looks on imaging. Like, really. So I went online and I found a few meditations and I have been trying those. Not always consistently, but at least sporadically. Now, another book I just read, it was our Get Literate Book Club selection for January, was Amazing Grace Adams by Fran Littlewood. This was a wonderful story, both funny and serious, about a middle-aged woman who is struggling in perimenopause and struggling with her family and specifically the relationship with her daughter. I loved it. Our book club had so much to say about it when we met. And this book sent me to Google. I was looking up everything about hormone health because this book just highlighted so many things that I needed to know about. So a simple Google search could be an inspired action from a book you've read, or the information you learn can make your life better. Now, another book I adore every book that Viola Shipman, aka Wade Rouse, writes. I read The Secret of Snow. And after I read The Secret of Snow, I started a new Michigan bucket list. Every book of his that I've read and every book that tends to mention Michigan, I just love. And I want to bring those settings to life. And so now there's a formal page in my notebook of my Michigan bucket list. And I know I have some Michigan friends in the Get Literate community, and they are eventually going to help me plan it and make sure I get there. Now, another thing I did in my journal, and this isn't something I usually do in my journal, but I did because I was so inspired by this main character. This main character says what's on her mind and says things that maybe she regrets at first, but realizes she does not have to apologize for. That is not me. So what I did in my journal inspired by her is to rethink a situation that I have been in where I wished it went differently. I wished I said something differently, and I rewrote the way that conversation could have went. I know that might seem weird, like it's not helpful because that episode is done and gone and you just need to move forward. But it really helped me rethink if something like that happens again in the future. I now have practiced a little bit of what I want to say so that I can feel good about it afterward. And that was just inspired by a scene or two in the book, but is really going to help me in the future. Now, I've got one more example to share, but I'm not going to say much because I'm going to do an entire episode on what this book made me do. The book I'm talking about is Your Perfect Year by Charlotte Lucas. It is a novel that begins on New Year's and ends with lives completely transformed because of one particular thing and one particular practice with that thing. And yes, I'm being cagey and I'm being secretive and I'm doing it on purpose because I want you to come back and listen to an episode just a couple of weeks in the future where I tell you I went deep into my inspired action from this book. And I'm going to keep going deep because it was just so enlightening. Such a possibility came out of this book. So this is my plan. I am pledging from this book forward, for every book that I've read, I will do something to document the inspired action I'm taking in my life. And yes, these could be teeny, teeny, tiny micro actions, or they could be bigger, grander things. I'm going to document my journey for myself. I want to snap pictures and kind of jot reminders of the things that I've done for every book in my notebook and in my book journal. But I am going to try to document this more on my social media feed. Just about every book I read ends up on there. I hold it up in front of my bookshelf and I snap a picture of it. But now I want to pair that with whatever inspired action the book prompted me to do. It'll hold me accountable. It'll get me excited for all of the things that I've been doing. And hopefully it can inspire you to do some of the same things with your books. So that's what I'm doing. And not only am I doing it here and in social media, I am going to give some more sneak peeks into my Get Literate community, especially that big project from Your Perfect Year. So if you're interested and you want to know more and you want to get some of products I end up making because of this really cool book project, then you can join me there. I'm at www.getliterate.co if you would like to join that Patreon community. But you can always go to my social media channels on just about every platform. I'm at Affinito Lit, or you can always head to the show notes, find this episode, and leave your comments and questions there. Now, one last thing. Tomorrow, if you're listening to this in real time, Valentine's Day, I release my brand new self-paced workshop. It's called Grow a Restorative Reading Practice. It is self-paced with a couple of live events paired in, and we are going to go deep into the practice of restorative reading, what it is, why it's important, and why we need it, how we do it, and there are all sorts of bonuses like how to do yoga for your reading life. What's the deal with aromatherapy and how can it enhance the reading benefits that we have? And what about sound therapy? How might that work to bring a more restorative environment to your reading life? It's going to be great fun. I'm adding to it all of the time, and I can't wait to get started. The self-paced journey starts tomorrow when the course is officially released, and we will kick off our first live session this Saturday, talking together and getting us excited for the road ahead. So if you'd like to learn more, you can head to alitlife.com and click on Learn with Stephanie and get more information, or just send me a message on whatever platform you prefer, and I will send a link directly to you so that you can learn more about it. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the different elements that I have packaged together. Thanks for sticking around to the very end, and I'll see you inside the next episode. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. Plus, if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life, like bonus podcast episodes, bibliotherapy book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking challenges, live events, giveaways, and much, much more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all of the previous content too. You can learn more at getliterate.co. And one more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our Bookish and Notebookish community too. Thanks for listening.